Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I am going to get things going here. Let's see, we're going to share my screen. Okay, good to go. Again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to go over a couple things today. I'm going to do a presentation for General Air here on installation and maintenance of air supply units. We have a lot to cover in an hour. So as usual, I'll be talking fast, but at the same time, I'll just be kind of firing a lot of just different things that we've come across over the years. So I think we got a really good webinar for you today, and we'll get started. So without further ado, General Air Products is a manufacturer of all the different compressed air solutions that are available on the market today, which is standard compressed air, dry air, and nitrogen. We also make accessories that go along with them, like air maintenance devices. And then we also have a line of 13D pump and tanks systems. This is me. I run our marketing department. The real reason I'm showing you this slide is the email address. I genuinely enjoy having these discussions about air supplies and the things that we do with General Air Products. It's my family's company, and we've been doing this a long time, so I really do like to talk about these things. And the reason I'm telling you that is that I really want to encourage you to reach out to me when you have a question about any kind of air supply issue, whether it's troubleshooting a compressor or whatever. Call us. I mean, I might call the 800 number. If you're not getting what you need, email me. If you have just some general questions, or you want to go over something that we were talking about in the presentation today or whatever, never hesitate to reach out to somebody at General Air Products. This is my contact information, the 800 number. When you call that, a real live human being is going to answer that, and that real live human being is probably going to know how to help you with whatever it is that you're looking for. So, like I said, please take advantage of that, and it's something that we pride ourselves on is interacting with the industry. I mean, we do it in a variety of ways, and yeah, I can't tell you enough. Please do reach out to us when you have a question. I have to make a quick disclaimer. NFPA requires everybody who's doing presentations where you quote their codes and standards to make a disclaimer about the opinions expressed there are the personal opinion of the author and presenter, and not necessarily present the official opinion of NFPA and its technical committees. So keep that in mind. All right, let's get going here. So today's subject for the General Air portion of this presentation is installation and maintenance of compressors and air supply units. So I'm going to do dry air and nitrogen at the end if we get to them. Really, they're both just air compressors with fancy filters on them. So there's a couple of extra steps to do, and we may get to that, we may not. We may have to do one separate that's just for that one. We can actually really get in a lot of detail for both of those products, which I don't intend to do today, but if there is an interest, let us know. We'll be more than happy to do a webinar that's specifically about their installation and maintenance. So the types of dry pipe sprinkler filling solutions, this is basically everything that's on the market. General Air makes all of this, and it's every variety of a nitrogen generator, from a wall mount to some of our really high-end ones that are all completely automated and do reporting and things like that. Different styles of oilless and quiet and lubricated, the whole deal. So, what we talk about today is going to have to do with every variety of these. I like to show this because a lot of times people don't realize how many varieties of air supply units there are available in the fire sprinkler world today. There's quite a few. A lot of people just, they look at it as just, it's just an air compressor, but there's different types, and there's reasons that there's different types. It's not just for fun or variety. We have different types of compressors for different situations. And, I think that it's important that people realize that, and this really, I think, does a good job of showing that off. But when we look at this large list, it can be really broken down into two types, which is an oilless piston style compressor and a lubricated reciprocating style air compressor. So lubricated compressors, you'll see, are in a base mount or tank mount configuration. You can see to the right there. pros and cons with these, or things about them. Lower initial cost when we're talking about the same CFM compared to a oilless version. We do cut off the oilless versions at about 1,200 gallon fill capacity, and the lubricated ones go up to 2,500 gallon fill capacity, and that's just a pricing issue. When you get to a larger oilless compressor, it gets far more expensive. So, but that allows the lubricated units to go up to a higher capacity economically. Repairability is something that we refer to, in that if the electrician fries the motor by bringing the wrong power, or somebody, which is a very common thing, this is another common thing, is not adding oil to the pump. You can replace just the pump or just the motor. But on the other hand, these are maintenance intensive as compared to the oilless units. That you need to make sure that you maintain that pump with oil. You need to take a look at the flywheel and the belt on a regular basis. And that's really the big difference. If somebody's trying to decide between oilless and lubricated, it's all about, will your customer do maintenance or not? If they will do maintenance, then maybe a lubricated unit is the way to go. If you know that's going to be a place where they don't consistently have you in, things like that, oilless is probably going to be the better way to go. But none of them are set it and forget it. Not even oilless. It's low maintenance, not no maintenance for the oilless compressors. So, and that's the first bullet point there. Our oilless compressors are also 1450 VDUR listed, which is the fire sprinkler listing for air compressors. Riser configurations offer no footprints, and then there's reduced cycling by way of tank mounted unit, and that also applies to the lubricated ones. Again, when we're talking about the same capacity, the same fill capacity, whether that's 125 gallons up to 1,200 gallons, the cost is going to be a little bit more, but the maintenance is a lot less. So that's how you weigh your options when it comes to those two types of compressors when you're installing. Some of the major parts here that I like to call out. So we got the motor, we got the pump, intake filter, number 4. We do not sell a lot of intake filters, which means in the world, there are a lot of clogged or intake filters with holes in them that are bringing debris into the pump, and that stuff can really break the pump. So intake filters are really important, and I like to call that out there on this lubricated unit. That's where it is. I'll show you where it is on the oilless ones as well. The pressure switch is number 5. I like to call out, and I don't even have this one labeled, I should, and that is the where you can see the oil level, so you can see your oil gauge, basically. Number 13, underneath of the tank. Sometimes I wonder if people don't know where this is too, because the manual drain valve under there has to be dumped out every once in a while, especially in places of high humidity. When you compress air, you get water. And one of the biggest things that we get returned every year is it's definitely, I think the number one thing that we get returned every year is pumps that the oil doesn't get changed in. But closer in that top 10 is units that get filled with water because nobody empties out the tank. So as a matter of maintenance, going in there and emptying the tank out of any kind of liquid is vital to the success of these machines and their longevity. We set these units at 4560 leaving, so that's a pressure switch where it'll tell the motor to turn on at 45 psi and off at 60. And then you would throttle that down to whatever pressure you need, say 40 or 20 in the system at the air maintenance device. But that's what these, and this range can go up from 4560 up to, I believe, 6080. Or it will go down to a little bit less than this, but I really wouldn't want to go down from there. You're better off staying there. They're available at single phase and 3-phase, high pressure, and we do sell 50 hertz units outside of the United States. They come with flex hoses, vibration pads, and we usually include oil. Something else to keep in mind at installation when you put a new one in. You may see in the oil gauge there, in the sight glass, a little bit of oil in there. We put a very small amount of oil in order to test run these units, but that is not enough oil to run the unit long term. That's why we include oil with it. So you must add oil when you get these, even if you see a little bit in there. It's not enough to start it. We're not allowed to ship them full of oil. So that's why we have to do that. But we can put a touch in there to make our run, test run. So that's, if you see any oil when you get it, that's what it would be. But you still need to add oil. So that's another issue that comes up from time to time. I want to make you aware of. Understanding the part numbers. This would be the part number for this unit, the LT 900-150A. LT means lubricated tank mount. 900, and so those next numbers there are telling you that this is the max system capacity. So this unit is good to fill up a 900-gallon system to 40 psi in 30 minutes. The 150 is going to indicate the horsepower. So that'd be 1.6 if it's a 1.6 horsepower, or 50 if it's a half horsepower, like that. And then A is single phase, B is 3-phase. That's very important. If you thought you were getting a single phase and you got something with a model number that ends in B, you don't have single phase, you have 3-phase. So there's a lot you can tell from the model numbers about how that compressor is sized. And if that doesn't stick or whatever, just remember that the information, a lot of the information you need is in the model number. You can always call us and say, hey, I'm looking at this model. What's it do? What am I looking at? And our people can certainly help you figure that out. We did do a design upgrade. The biggest part of the upgrade, and this was several years ago, but I still like to bring it up because some people don't know. You notice this line here going from the pressure switch to the motor. We used to have you do that wiring yourselves, but now we've been able to change that so that we pre-wire the motor to the pressure switch. That's the biggest one. Then we included the flex hose and vibration pads and things like that. But that's what our LT Plus series is. Here's a major components for the the oilless units. Again, you can see the motor and the pump 1 and 2. They're stuck together, right? That's all one piece. So if the motor breaks or the pump breaks or whatever, you have to replace that whole unit. And that's just something to keep in mind. Still, number 12, have to empty the tank of water when it's going to happen on a regular basis. And then also notice here number 4. That's your intake filters on these oilless compressors. It looks like a black cap. It's integrated into the head of the on the crank case. So it's a black plastic piece there that has our logo on it that unscrews, and you just take that out and you put in new intake filters. So that's really important to know and to be looking at those on occasion. That's the biggest thing as far as maintenance goes on these. So if it's in a more dirty environment, you want to look at that on a regular basis. If it's in a pretty clean environment, then it probably isn't going to get dirty very often. But certainly in like a warehouse environment or stuff, there's going to be a lot of dust. You get into a sawmill or a concrete plant, chemicals, all of those things can beat up the inside of a compressor starting at the intake filter. Something to always keep an eye on. So this is our riser mount series here, again, UL listed. These leave our building set for 30 PSI on, 44 off, and then there's a 14-pound differential. We'll probably touch on this again later, but that differential, that difference between 30 and 44, that's the lowest differential the switch can do. So you do not want to reduce that differential at all. If you ever feel like you need a tighter differential, let's say because you have a low pressure unit, you need a low pressure unit, 13 to 18. And that can't go any smaller than that 5 PSI differential, okay? So that's really important to understand. You can move the range up and down, and there's a screw for that. We have videos on our website about how to adjust the pressure switches. You can move the range up, so you can move the 13, 18 up while keeping the 5 PSI, or the 30, 44 up while keeping that 14 PSI differential. But what you can't do, and what you don't want to do, you'll definitely break the switch if you start turning the screw to reduce that further because it's set at its lowest setting. Pressure switches are not overly complicated, but you do need to be educated on them. There's a handful of steps to do. So if you ever need that education, do reach out to us. I'd be more than happy to put a presentation on just for your company or whatever on how to adjust pressure switches in the field and things like that. So yeah, they're not overly complicated, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can turn the wrong screw and break the air compressor or break the pressure switch, which, again, typically you're not going to break the pressure switch unless you let it short cycle for months on end as a result of that. But what you typically will do is adjust the pressure switch outside of its range, and it's really hard to get back into range, our recommended thing is to just buy a new pressure switch once that happens, and that's pretty inconvenient for everybody. So, a quick phone call to us, or doing a little education session on pressure switches can avoid some pretty significant headaches. Again, part numbers, same metric here. Start out with OL. The next 3 digits are the fill capacity. The next digits are the horsepower. Single phase is going to tell you. The C is just kind of left over some old model numbers that we used to make back in the early 80s. And then a dash LP is going to tell you it's low pressure or high pressure or explosion proof. Anything dash after that is special about that unit. Here's the tank mounted units, the tank mounted oilless units. I think we kind of covered some of these already by talking about their pros and cons. Yeah, so we can move on to the next one, and then their part numbers, again, follow the same metric as the rest of them. Some of the OL Plus features, increased system capacity over our older units, and they're adjustable up to 60 PSI now. We do have 208 voltage available with all of these motors. We have a new riser mounting bracket that makes it a whole lot easier to mount. This has been out for, I want to say, about 3 or 4 years at this point that we've been doing these types of new features. So they may not be exactly new, but I like to call them out because some people don't realize the 208 voltage is available, or they like to tell me their, when I go to trade shows, tell me their nightmare stories of holding up the compressor while they're trying to bolt it onto the riser mounting bracket. And all I can do is apologize for that for many years. Now we have some hooks on the bracket, so it's a very simple one-man job to mount one of the riser mounted units to the riser. Q series compressors. So these are quiet fire protection air compressors. And the Q series are basically an oilless compressor, available in all the configurations that our oilless compressors are available in: riser mount, tank mount, high pressure, low pressure, everything. So again, I don't recommend these everywhere. If you want to save a couple bucks, you can, when it's a loading dock, no one cares about how loud it is. So save yourself a few dollars and put a regular one in. But anytime that you're in a situation where you have a nursing home or a hospital, hotels, offices, churches, golf courses, all of those types of places where noise can be an issue. We had people call us about their choir getting drowned out by our noisy air compressor and stuff, things like that. So think about where you're installing these things, because a quiet unit might be worth its while. And if you want to show that off a little bit about what it can do for your customers who are complaining to you about the noise of a compressor, there's a video on our site. So you go to generalairproducts.com/Q, and you'll go to the Q series page, and you just hit play on that button there, and you will watch a little video that really demonstrates how loud the unit is. But shorthand on it, the way that I like to explain it, it's designed so you don't hear it on the other side of drywall. We don't want you to hear it at all. So it really is very, very quiet. If it was running in my office right now, you might hear a little hum in the background, but that would be about all you would hear from where you're at. So it is very quiet, and it has great applications in that regard. So with that overview, let me make sure with that overview on those units, let's take that and talk about the installation of any of these units. Okay. So I like to start out with this step one, and I'm actually really going to harp on this because, again, it's something very simple to do. It takes a couple minutes anytime you open up a new compressor, but I can't tell you enough how many times that we have dealt with problems that lasted days long because a compressor got to a job site that basically fell off the back of a truck somewhere between our facility and the job site. And the box was maybe a little scuffed up, but nobody popped it open to look at it. Well, of course, it's a special unit, a 3-phase, something special, and it takes a week for us to build. Well, now you get it, you open it up, and you see, at the job site that it's not working. Well, we encourage our distributors to do it, but if you're ever picking things up from our distributors, I would say before you leave a distributor, pop it open and look at it. Make sure that the unit isn't banged up, especially if the box is scuffed up. Taking that 2 minutes to look over this unit before you walk off with it will save you a tremendous amount of heartache and time. So, and I'm going to continue to harp on that on the next couple things, because what happens is, like, this is a picture of a unit where the box had a minor scuff on it, but it had fallen off of a forklift and it jammed the belt guard into the pump and the motor, and it actually bent the pump's rod from coming out of it that goes into the flywheel. So the whole thing was not able to be used, and this turned into a big nightmare for everybody involved, because there was no one could determine whose fault it was. No one took the time to look at it, and they needed, of course, to install it right then and there. You guys all know better than I do how tight time frames are, whether it's service or installation. They just don't mess around. So what I want you to understand, and this is a picture here on your right of, this is how every box leaves our building if it's a single tank mounted air compressor, right? We have the straps on there, but this box, understand, is basically a glorified dust cover, okay? It does not support weight. So if that looks like something's been sitting on top of that, then most likely something in there is broken. If you don't see one of these silly little cone hats on top of it, that means the trucking company took it off, which means they stacked something on top of it, which means something inside is probably broken. So there's always one of these caps on there. There's always strapped down here. And I'm going to show you some other pictures. We have read before signing freight bill. We made this especially for you to take the time, and our distributors to take the time to understand what their rights are here when the stuff gets dropped off, so that people will take a look at it. This is another thing here. So you can see we use tape that has General Air products on it, and this is how all of these orders leave our building, whether they're going to a job site or our distributors. If you don't see General Air tape on this with shrink wrap, it's very possible that the shipping companies opened up the unit and took the box apart for whatever reason to re-skid it or something like that, and it's very possible that something gets lost or missing or damaged as a result of that. So if you don't see General Air tape around these things, around the shrink wrap that's on them, take a very close look before you sign off it and say that it's good to go. Okay. If you ever do have to ship something back to us, please make sure that you ship it very well. Oftentimes that's like a return of some type, and if you have a problem with the unit and you want to return it, if you don't, or need to return it as a warranty, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you need to return it, we need to do an analysis of what happened. We really like rip these things apart, trying to figure out what went wrong with them. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. But as we do that, just remember, it left like this. We have these things really battened down pretty tight. So we would ask that you, if you ever have to send stuff back to us, do the same as best you can, so that we can figure out what went wrong and not, what got beat up in shipping. Because in an instance like this, I believe this one, if I go back, these guys were having a pressure switch problem with this. But at this point, everything on this unit is broken. So there's nothing we can do to help them. Maybe that was a warranty, but it certainly isn't now. So we really want to help. Help us help you in that regard. If you have a problem in the field, we really need you to call us before you send something back. And this happens with our distributors a lot. And I put this more on the service end of things, but if there's ever a problem in the field, call us to try to figure out what the problem is. It's part of what you're paying for when you buy a General Air Products air compressor is our expertise and our available troubleshooting. We sell parts. We'll sit on the phone with you for hours if it takes it to figure out what the problem is and solve it for you. If we can't solve it for you, then we're going to do a return, and then we'll have you guys buy a new unit, and then we'll refund the old unit if we find out that it was in fact under warranty, a problem under warranty, which we pay very close attention to. So that is the process, and if that's something that you need to know more about, please, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to explain it, or so will our salespeople. But following that, while it can be frustrating, what ends up being more frustrating for everybody is when that gets taken off the riser because of a problem, no one calls us, it gets dropped into a box, and it bounces around the back of a truck for a while until it eventually makes it to a distributor, and the distributor has no idea why it's there because it's been sitting there. Somebody just left it on the shipping dock. Before you know it, everybody doesn't know where this compressor is or what's going on with it, and somebody wants a refund and for a compressor that we've never seen. So, like I said, following these things in a difficult time, and I understand that it's difficult, will result in a better, faster solution where possible. So following these steps and everything. Yes. So upon return, we test the unit for the described malfunction. If the compressor is working properly, we'll send a report on what was found so that you guys can figure out what was going on there. One of my favorite examples of that is a short cycling, and we can sit there and say, okay, yeah, this was short cycling. You have a leak somewhere, so you need to fix that leak before you put anything else in. That's why we're very, we want to know when we get something back. We have a very selfish interest first in making sure that we're not putting out defective products, because that's a sure way to ruin our company. So the first thing we do when we get these things back is take it apart to make sure if there are any defects, because if there is, we need to find out if there is any other that went out with that defect. So we do a very close examination of these things that come back for that reason, for starters. And then secondly, the reason that we take a close look at these things is so that when we get to the point where we found the problem and it's not the unit but something around the unit, as it often is, what we want to do then is give you a report of what we found so that you can correct the issue on site before another compressor gets broken. If the compressor is found to be defective and under warranty, we'll issue a refund for that unit, and at that point you already have your new unit, so you're good to go. And then if there's anything else, any other kind of returns, we do a 25% restock fee. If the unit was ordered wrong or something like that. We have a 1-year manufacturer warranty. We do not cover labor or water damage product, freight damages. Those are all things that we used to be able to help out with in the past, but things have changed over the years that we can no longer do that. So labor, water damage, and freight damages are not covered by warranty, which is all more reason to pop these boxes open and take a look at them before you get them. All right, so that was me harping on number one, doing an inspection, just like I was saying, is that, before you take your box anywhere, whether it got shipped to your office or you're picking up at a distributor, train your guys yourselves to pop open that box and take a look, make sure what's in there is not damaged. And the next thing to make sure is it the right one in the box? This would be on General Air, and it does happen every once in a while. One of our guys on the line gets a little overzealous and just starts throwing the wrong labels on the wrong boxes or something like that. We're very diligent with this stuff. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. So again, always worth, if you're popping open the box, make sure that the model number on the box matches the model of the unit inside. All right, so here's another recommendation for installation. Okay, so now we've got it out of the box. When you take it out of the box, one of the things that I highly recommend is doing the mechanical installation at the same time the electrical installation is going to be going on, so that even though you might not be electricians, you can watch what's going on and see if it's running properly once the electrician's done their work. I know that this is somewhat impractical on some job sites and everything, but it is, if you can arrange this, it is, again, worth the while to do so, because I would say if our number one return, our number one overall reason for return, I would say is wiring issues. The number one return in and of itself is probably people not putting oil into the pump at the right time. But if I were to kind of collect all of the, oil versus electrical problems overall, or, people miswiring it, things like that are going to be the number one thing that we get phone calls about and returns about. Make sure that the electrical circuit complies with all local and national codes. So again, that might not fall under your scope of work, but if it looks sketchy, say something. Because if it looks sketchy, it probably is, and you don't know what's going to happen with that compressor. And remember, if the electrician breaks the air compressor, they're not, nothing against anybody, but they're probably not going to fess up to that. They're going to let that thing hum or do whatever it is that they did to it. And then when it finally breaks, it's going to be on your dime. So that's another reason why I say know as much as you can about the electrical aspects of this, and be there for them as much as you can be, because it really protects the investment that you're making in the compressor. Here's some other new wiring code in NFPA 13, it now says that a motor-operated compressor intended for use with sprinkler systems shall be provided with a means of permanently connected to a wiring system. So what that means is you cannot use a plug-in air compressor permanently. If you need to use one temporarily, that's not going to be an issue, I don't think, with most AHJs as you're waiting for the new one to come in. So for a couple of days, a plug-in air compressor will get you through, but no longer can you have a plug-in air compressor. You must have it hardwired. And that's important. It's a really good thing to do. You don't have multiple things on that circuit. People aren't shutting the light off and accidentally shutting off the air compressor. This is a really good move by the standard, and it's something that people need to be aware of. So no more plug-in air compressors. Yes, so there we go. Select an installation location within 6 feet of the electrical disconnect. Notice that's the other part of this code here. Let me see if that, let's see. Yeah, I didn't mention it there in that previous slide, but on this step 4 here, the other code change that took place is that a fire protection air compressor cannot be hooked up to a light switch as the disconnect. It must be some sort of industrial duty disconnect. So what you see in this picture here is an industrial duty disconnect. It's a very simple piece of equipment. We have it hardwired there. The 6-foot rule is an NEC, National Electrical Code rule for motor operated equipment, that the industrial disconnect must be within 6 feet of it. But it is now, as far as the standard has said, is that with the recent changes that are through now, they're in the current edition of the standard, is that you cannot plug in the air compressor and you cannot use the light switch as a disconnect. Anchor the compressor securely, whether that's to the floor or the wall or the riser in a riser mounting situation. Making sure that that's good and snug. Remember, this is a piece of equipment that vibrates when it runs. If it vibrates and it's loose, and that's something for on the maintenance end to check to make sure that you're tightening that down. So as you check the intake filters, make sure that the thing isn't wobbling while it's running. If there's any room to tighten it down, do so. Check oil level. Can't tell you that one enough. Check that oil level on the oil sight glass. Should be about half full in all of these sight glasses, or half empty if you're a pessimist that day, but it should be half. Like I gave you the spiel already on the oil that comes with it. We do sell oil, and if you call in, I believe it's 30 weight non-detergent is what we use. We have specially formulated compressor oil if you want to buy ours, but I'm not in the oil business, so whatever works for you is fine by me. But do call, because we do have some with a few different weights. So if you're looking to replace oil, certainly you can order it from us. But you can also go to your auto body store and buy some. Just make sure that you call us up first, get the model number, and give us the model number. We'll be able to tell you what oil to get. Like I said, most of the time it's 30 weight non-detergent. Step 7 here, connect the fire protection air compressor to the airline. So right now we have no power to it, or the power should be off, and we're connecting it mechanically. All right, and we use that stainless steel flex hose that we include with the unit to do that connection. That cuts down on all sorts of problems by using that flex hose. Again, we're ensuring that the power is off at the main panel and there should be a dedicated breaker in there for the air compressor. It should not be on a circuit with other pieces of equipment. So whether that's on the other side of the building or whatever, that's how it should be. Before you turn any power on or while the power is still off, make sure that the motor, and this is something that you can do, right? Before the electrician gets there or whatever, there's a diagram on the side. We have a color-coded book on our website that shows you exactly what wires should be connected to what terminals for what voltage. If you want to be very thorough, and that's what this is all about, is being as thorough as we can, you pop off the front of the motor plate and you see what color wires are on what terminals, and make sure that it's wired for the voltage that you want it to be wired for. Then you can also use those terminals to rewire the compressor for different voltages as well. They'll come with a standard voltage, but all of our compressor motors can be adjusted to different voltages except for the Q series. Q Series is 115 only. Connect wires from the motor to the pressure switch. Like I said, almost all of our units now, unless it's probably some custom ones, may not have wiring from the pressure switch to the motor, but everything else does at this point. But you know, if you're using anybody else's compressors, you might not have that, so you do need to wire from the motor to the pressure switch. Then you want to bring power from the pressure switch to the industrial disconnect. That would be the next step. And again, this is all usually the electrician doing this, but if you know these steps, you can watch them do this and make sure that they're doing it right. And then they didn't go into the pressure switch and start adjusting screws. They didn't, you know, they checked to make sure that it was wired for the right voltage, because you know out of the box it's 115, but this is supposed to be wired for 208, which means the electrician had to pop off the motor plate and make an adjustment. And if they didn't do that, well, they could be about to fry the motor. And this is steps that you can take to make sure that doesn't happen. Once you have power between the motor, the pressure switch, and the industrial disconnect, and we have it mechanically now, we have it anchored, and we have it mechanically hooked up to the system by way of the flex hose, it's time to turn the power on. And with the cut-in pressure, it should be low enough that the compressor should start running right away. At this point, you can fill the system or you isolate the compressor. I recommend that you isolate the compressor for the initial fill and just fill up the compressor to the pressure point. So closing the air maintenance device and pressurizing the unit itself. Seeing that it holds pressure and stuff like that. Then once you do see that it holds pressure and there aren't any issues, then you open up the fill line, and that's this. Hopefully you can see my cursor here, but your fill line to the unit, or I'm sorry, to the system, and then the air will start going in there, the compressor will run, and you'll get your 30-minute fill. While the unit's running, and this is again, if the electrician there, maybe you have your alarm guy with you, something like that, using a voltmeter to make sure that you're getting the right voltage to the unit is a great move. You know, what will happen, and this is a very common issue, is let's say that the main power panel is on one side of the warehouse, and then a football field away is where the air compressor is. And somebody runs a 14 gauge wire across that building from the main power panel across 300 yards all the way to the air compressor. And it started out at the panel at 115 volt. Well, by the time it gets to the unit, because of volt drop, you're going to lose a ton of that, and it's going to be down to 60, 70 volts that the unit's getting, which means the only way you're really going to see it, I mean, if it's extreme, you're going to see the unit really running, and it sounds like heck. I mean, it's just going to be really, it's going to sound really beat up. But that said, a voltmeter really gets right down on it, you know. You're going to see exactly what voltage and amperage you're getting at the unit if you have the voltmeter on there. And they're not hard to use, and any electrician will have one, so that's another good thing to put on startup. This step 15, like what I was recommending was, you know, when you first turn the compressor on, isolating it from the unit and then checking for leaks. But you can do it after you're filling the system as well. Just spraying all of the connections and things like that to see if there's any leaks with a bottle of soapy water. You get bubbles, you got a leak. It's that simple. When using an air maintenance device with a regulator, cut-in pressure of the compressor should be at least 5 to 10 psi higher than the regulator setting. So the compressor should be overpressurized for the system. So I can't recommend enough, and that's why I was saying with, say, the lubricated unit, for example, it comes out of the box at 45 psi on, 60 psi off, okay? If you only need, say, 40 psi in the system, don't adjust it down. Let it stay where it's at 45, 60, and adjust to your system pressure at the air maintenance device regulator, not at the unit itself. Let the unit itself overpressurize, and the AMD will do what it's supposed to do to hold back that pressure. And that's exactly what it's meant to do. So always have 5 to 10 psi higher on the compressor side of the air maintenance device than what you need in the system so that the regulator can work properly. Fire protection compressors normally set around 30 and cut in, 40 out. If a different pressure is required, make the adjustments while the compressor is isolated from the system. So that's when you want to start playing, when you want to start playing around with the pressure switch. Now notice the scary sticker on here that says may void warranty. That is there to scare you into calling us about your pressure switch adjustment. So call the 800 number. I have this model number. I have this pressure switch on here, whatever it is. What do I do? Which screw do I turn to adjust this? This is a common phone call we get. And what scares me is it should be more common. Call us literally anytime. I understand that, especially for your guys, even if we do training, it might be weeks before they have to do an adjustment, months even. So, I don't expect everybody to remember how to work with this. But what I do is the 800 number is right there on the thing. Call it. We're happy to help. And it will save you and everybody a lot of headache by just calling and saying, hey, real quick, which screw do I turn on this unit, to adjust the pressure up or down? We'll be able to help you and give you, that'll be a 5-minute conversation that saves you all kinds of trouble. Right here, we're pointing out the main calibration screw, and that adjusts both the cut in and cut out, and that's what we want to adjust on this unit in particular. And then under here, this one right here, that's the differential screw, which you don't want to mess with. And the differential screw, I mean, most of the pressure switches that we have, we cover them with glue to make it even harder to turn the wrong screw. But I still highly recommend you call us first. But that's one way that we know somebody adjusted the differential. When they tell us that the compressor is broken, it comes back to us, and there's a bunch of screw marks, screwdriver marks over the screw, and there's no glue left there. We're not especially smart here, but we do know when the glue's been scraped off of that, and that means the adjustment was made. But the fortunate thing in those circumstances is we can put a new pressure switch on it and send it back to you, and we paid for a lesson. So at any rate, call us when you need us for pressure switch adjustment is what the long and short of that is. Put air maintenance device in maintenance mode once the system is at your 30-minute fill. So once you've done your fill, you do that with the fill line open. And for some people that might be obvious, but we do get calls on that once in a while that somebody says, oh, I have to fill this through the maintenance, through the regulator. No, you do not. The 30-minute fill will not be met if you go just through the regulator. You must open up all the valves. It will go through the entire AMD. It will fill up in 30 minutes. And then once you're at your 30-minute fill, close the fill line, and then all the air will be routed up and around through the regulator. All right, I want to do some codes and standards around ITM. So this is the NFPA 2517 edition. We're going to just run through some of these here. So that was a lot of the installation. And once you're in maintenance mode, you're good to go. So let's talk about maintaining it at this point. So this is existing, or this was already in the code, and this is basically all it said. 5424 said, refer to the manufacturer's instructions. And if you're like everybody else in the world, the manufacturer instructions are not around after about 5 minutes of the box being open. They're just gone. Now, granted, they're on our website. You have access to us at any point that you need us, but typically people are looking for something and it just gets thrown out. So the manufacturer's instructions are available to you at any time, and you do need to follow those. So I highly recommend somebody read through them. And then beyond that, though, they've added in 2017 a couple of sections here. The inspection section, air compressor, inspect to make sure the air compressor is free of physical damage. Power wiring to the air compressor is intact and free of physical damage. Piping is intact and free of physical damage. So a lot of this is just looking at the thing, and is this thing taking a hit? Did it get run over by a bus? Is this thing seem to be functioning properly? I mean, it really is an overall just kind of, let me just look at the outside of the unit and make sure that this is doing. And I'm all for this addition to the standard in that anything that gets people to pay more attention to the air supply is a good thing. You should be looking at these on the regular because they really are the heart of dry systems. To test them, you want to now test and make sure that the compressor is operated as intended with the pressure drop. So you try to make a pressure drop or allow some of the air to bleed off, and then make sure that it turns on at the right pressure and turns off at the right pressure. And it's going to restore 30 minutes, restore it in the 30-minute time frame, and that it doesn't overheat while running. Overheating is a little difficult. Just so you know, compressors do get hot, like to the point where you don't want to touch them, especially after a 30-minute run. The motor's going to get hot. The air coming out of a pump is anywhere from 200 to 400 degrees. So it gets hot. So be careful with that. But it's up to you. You're going to have to determine, is it overheated or is it just running hot? I mean, it's supposed to run hot. So, but if it runs for 2 seconds and it's still hot, or if it's always running, that's another thing too, is that, maybe that's what's causing it to overheat. Not so much a bad voltage, which can, cause it to overheat. But at any rate, when you start to think that a compressor is overheated in this regard, just call us and we'll help you zero in on what the problem is. So this is basically just saying that the compressors, 13.10.4 is saying compressors that require oil have the oil replaced at least on an annual basis. So while the standard says annual, remember the standard's about a minimum requirement. We recommend annual for oil as well, but if you have an older system where the unit is running tons, say several times an hour, that means it's going to go through its oil a whole lot faster than it's running just several times a day. So you might have to go back more often and change the oil. The other thing you can do is fix the leaks in the system, and then it'll run less. But one's easier than the other, and it depends on the job, I guess. But at the same time, that's what the annual basis is a standard minimum. But if the compressor's running a ton, certainly you're going to have to change the oil more frequently. Another maintenance issue to pay attention to is, where are you installing the air compressor? This air compressor was installed near a body of salt water, and this was only 3 years old. Two or 3 years old when we got this picture. It's been eaten up by corrosive environment. Another one that eats up actually more of the inside than the outside is janitor's closets, where there's chemicals like ammonia and bleach and stuff like that. It goes right into the intake filter and eats up the inside of the compressor. Sawmills, chemical plants, just really dirty environments, things like that. All of those things, just take into account where you're putting this air compressor, and can you put it somewhere else where it'll be protected from that environment, or maybe even just draw the intake from a different environment. So it's something to think about. Maintenance instructions: make sure that you lock out the power source and shut it off before you do any maintenance. Check oil level. These are our instructions. You want to check the oil level in lubricated compressors. Drain condensate from the air receiver. That's a huge one. We were talking about that, but that's huge. Check for unusual noise or vibration. Clean air filters. Clean external parts. This is all, again, some really basic stuff, and you can look it up on our sheets here that tells you all of these things. Make sure that they're free of physical damage, whatnot. Let's see, that's quarterly as needed. Plus annually change compressor oil, make sure that the oil sight glass is clean, and then change the intake filters or air filters. I got a couple minutes left here, so I think I can get into the dry air and the nitrogen generators. They shouldn't take too much time here, and then I'll be able to hand it over to Scott for SPPs. So the dry air unit is originally designed for freezer rooms and cold storage applications, and we've also begun to use it for corrosion mitigation, as dry air offers significant results for certain applications of corrosion mitigation. Again, the main thing it was developed for was freezer room and cold storage, so that there's no ice plugs. The idea being that the air is so dry that there's no water in it, and that water, so being that there's no water when you get to the piece of pipe that is the interface between ambient air and freezer room air, there is no water there to collect at that point. That's what a dry air unit does. So freezer rooms, cold storage, parking garages, we've used them in, and potential corrosion or MIC affected areas. You want to make sure that you have open airflow around this. This is these are both good pictures of bad installations. This one outside is completely open and outside. I believe this was over in the Middle East, actually. So they weren't really thinking about rain or anything like that. But that said, if this is not meant to get wet, none of our compressors are meant to get wet. They will break. So they do have to have some sort of housing around them. But when you build the housing, like on the right, it can't be so close. And this actually had a front door on it that was bolted to it. Again, the compressor gets hot when it runs. If it runs a lot, that heat's going to stay inside of that enclosure. When it stays inside of that enclosure, you're going to overheat the unit and have it shut down. So it's not going to run properly. So giving it enough room to breathe, but not so much that it can be exposed to the weather, is where you want to be. And if you ever have to build a housing, or if you're not sure about the distance around it, always call us. I say a foot to a foot and a half on all sides is the way to go. On the outlet of the compressor, this is another kind of thing on the dry air units. To make sure the dry air unit is working and it is in fact dry, you put on this dry air pack test kit with a color change desiccant on it. And when the color changes, that means moist air is coming out of the unit, which means you need a desiccant change, which is one of the big differences on what you need to do with the dry air pack. So we'll talk about that now. Again, this is an air compressor. This bottom part is a lubricated tank-mounted air compressor, so all of the maintenance that needs to be done with that compressor is what needs to be done on a dry air unit. But then you get up into this top part here, which is where we have the desiccant and where the drying occurs. So that adds some complication to this. But the intake filters, there's a pre-filter down here. There's these mufflers here. All of these things should be looked at from a maintenance standpoint, so that they're cleaned out. Another thing that we just set up, and I really got to recommend, if you deal with any dry air packs or you have them in your facility, go to my.generalairproducts.com or give us a call and we'll walk through. And we can register your unit for you. We just set this site up. We can register your unit for you. And what will happen then is you'll get email alerts when your unit has to be maintained. So you'll get an email from our dashboard here that says, hey, it's time to change the desiccant, it's time to change the oil, whatever you need to do on that. So, and we're working to expand that through the rest of our product line. So my.generalairproducts.com, if you have dry air packs, register them and get updates on when you need to do maintenance. This is the list of maintenance. The real thing that I want to call out, because the quarterly and annually are all basically, there's a few extras on there, but they're all basically compressor maintenance. The main thing is every 3 years, you need to change the desiccant out. Every 3 years. And then we have those maintenance kits available. So this would be a full maintenance kit with the desiccant replacement in it as well. Then once it's running and once you get it back up and running, this is about servicing it. So check for any leaking oil, make sure that the lights and gauges are working, watch it go through a few cycles and make sure that it is operating the way it's supposed to. Then you want to check the intake filters for particulate and oil vapor and change the intake filters and this the intake filter and this particulate filter here as well. And this is the mufflers I was referring to. This is going to tell you about how much oil to add to each of these units. And that's available on the cut sheets and in the installation manuals and also by calling us. You also want to take a look at the belt for any tension and wear. That's, again, a standard part of lubricated tank-mounted maintenance procedures, is checking that belt. And what we mean by there is debris. Like if it starts to get misaligned, the belt starts rubbing against the flywheel, and you start to see little bits of powder, black powder, that collect on the pan or on the floor underneath of the unit. And if you start to see that, that means that things are getting misaligned, which means the pump and the motor might be getting loose and they're not lined up properly, so they need to be retorqued. And then you'll probably need to get a new belt at that point too. We carry our belts for a long time, so the belts are really easy to get. Inspect the desiccant. So again, if you have bright, it should be bright white, very solid. If it's even a little bit off color, like yellowish or grayish, and also if it's soft and it breaks apart in your hand, it's certainly time to replace it. Now with nitrogen generators, again, we're the manufacturer of everything in that unit. So it's our compressor, our unit from top to bottom. We have wall mount units. We have these floor mount units. I think on the other one too, I showed you some of our really high-end units that have all the automation to them if you're ever interested in that as well. But here's where I wanted to show you this is just a slide I grabbed from one of our other presentations, but you can see the inside here. And over here in the bottom right, there's 3 pre-filters before you go into the membrane, which is where all the magic happens. And the oxygen is separated from the nitrogen, and you lose your, and that's where you get your nitrogen from. But before that, we need to condition the air to make sure that there's no oil or water or any particulate that gets to the membrane, or else the membrane will be destroyed. So those 3 need to be changed annually, just to ensure that they're always working. The membrane, hopefully you only have to replace that every 7 or 8 years, because that's pretty expensive. And then on the back is a oilless tank-mounted air compressors. Our larger ones have lubricated ones. It's serviced in the same way that you service a standard fire protection air compressor, and all the things that you need to do there. These are our air maintenance devices. These are the newest ones here. We have a new regulator on those. And the reason I brought that up is I just wanted to call out to everybody, just so you know, at installation, or if you're doing service work, if you have one air compressor, and we recommend one air compressor serves 3 systems, same thing with the dry air or nitrogen, but it can do more, but just be careful with that. And that's a subject for a different time. But if you're serving multiple systems with one air supply unit, you need a air maintenance device on each of those systems, not just one coming out of the air compressor. So that's an installation kind of reminder there. It's a breakdown of the compressor, or I'm sorry, the air maintenance device. And one of the reasons I have this here is people ask me, hey, you know, the way that I have this sitting, I need to install the air maintenance device upside down so that the regulator here is at the bottom and the fill line is at the top. Can I do that? Yes, you can, but you have to be careful. And that's with number 7, which is the Y strainer. The Y strainer collects debris and particulate from getting into the regulator, and it catches it in this trap down here at the bottom. You can see this here. And it catches it in that trap, and that trap has a little plug on it that you can unscrew and clean out, which I highly recommend is done on a regular basis as part of maintenance as well, at least an annual basis. But if you were to flip this upside down, this is no longer collect that particulate and those bits and pieces of things that get blown into it, because it will be out of the way. So if you have to install this upside down, what you need to do is put a wrench on that Y strainer and turn it upside down so that the trap is in line with gravity, having the parts drop into it. So another kind of tip there. Again, I want to just reiterate before we wrap up here that customer care comes first. So this is our customer service team here. Please call us when you need us. Call us from the field. If you put in an order and you get a delivery time that you're not liking, call us and we'll see if we can help you out. We usually can. I mean, but I can't emphasize enough how accessible we are. And I know that people more and more get out of touch with that because they think that they're not going to talk to a real human being or they're not going to get any help. That is not the case here. We are very old school in that regard. We have real live human beings who know what they're talking about answering the phones. They will be able to help you. Our fire sprinkler training room, again, go to training.generalairproducts.com. And you'll find out about our training room there. We actually have some classes going on right now. The training includes, it's not just air compressor training. We have everything from AGF here. SPP was kind enough to donate us a fire pump, and we have a working fire pump system in here with a fire pump controller from Tornatech. We have, like I said, all of AGF's products. We have dry valves that are live from every dry valve manufacturer. We have wet valves that are live. We have backflow prevention assemblies. I mean, we've got everything in the industry in this place. I'm really excited about it. And go to training.generalairproducts.com to watch a video on it. There's the website there. This is my email again, rmfjr@generalairproducts. Please do use it. The 800 number, again, please do use that as well.